Basically, we called the class Destiny versus Karma, and the depth of this class, we're going to go into each person's North Node, and we're going to go, which I explained to people, I send out a little piece on what the North Node is, which everybody got. So I'm not going to go into the explanation of how we find the node or where it crosses the axis, because it's pretty well explained on that page. But I do want to talk about the depth of why I started to study astrology and the core essence of what I've learned from astrology and what the node is in regards to our personal chart. And basically, if you had a very powerful in-depth study just of somebody's sun sign, their moon sign, and the North Node. Hi, Gino, you're back. Great. You would have a profound insight into that person's reason for being, their raison d'etre, and their whole struggle. And you would realize in the depth of the South Node that two things are shown to us in our South Node. The first thing is it's a reflection of thousands of lives. So there are proclivities and traumas and weaknesses and strengths and lack of structure, foundational structure, and structure that we come in with, and we want to reach for our North Node so that we can profoundly move from being caught on the wheel, the cycle of life. So the expression of the nodes are very intense, and some of them may, when I first read my South Node and my North Node, I was like, oh, this is awful, like what I came in to confront. But as I got older and as I went through my life and as I went into the depths of esoteric astrology, I realized that this was probably the best advice that I'd ever gotten and the best reflection of my greatest suffering in this life and why I was suffering. And the thing I love most about spiritual astrology is it takes you out of the realm of being a victim to the place of being deeply, profoundly aware of your own shortcomings and the changes that you need to make in your own life in order to move higher on the spiral of your own existence. So some of the acute traumas that we suffered in past lives are so painful in our soul memory that we wish to avoid them. And so sometimes, say for example, we died falling off a mountain, and we have this horrific sense of fear of heights and a phobia about heights, or a phobia about waters, or a phobia about spiders, or whatever it is. And so we think, people laugh at us and say, well, that's a ridiculous phobia that you've got, but really it's an association with many lives or a profoundly traumatic death through one of those situations that could take 5-10 years of therapy just to get to the core fear zone. The South Node is very powerful to show us our karmic lessons and to show us where we, and there can be also, as we said the last time, built into the chart, good karma, positive karma. But the South Node is like, think of life like this huge, great chain in the ocean of God. And so you're pulling out, this is your life. And it's a huge ocean and huge chain. And you're just pulling out one link. And that link is this life. And you pull out that small part, and it's acting out this node in one house of your life. It's just like when you look at the whole chart, it's only acting out that north node of where you're supposed to reach for. It's only acting out in one house. And the south node is sitting in the house of where you may have indulged in extreme decadence or pride or ego or lack of self-confidence or whatever. And so the south node and the house it sits in are deeply associated with what happened to you. And so some pretty nasty stuff's going to come out tonight, but then there's going to be solutions or ways to reach into the north node so that you're not just living the effects of everything that you've caused, but you're actually initiating yourself to be born into a new expression of being. So we come in, like people think, oh, well, a little baby comes in, it's so perfect, and then it gets corrupted by society, by everything it sees, by education. No, the baby comes in with that nodal baggage, with that thousands of lives of building and forming the good and bad effects of its own existence and its own proclivity to keep repeating the same existence. So what is the core essence of learning spiritual astrology? To get off the wheel and to advance in your own self-awareness. Like Teresa of Avila, the great Christian mystic, she sat every single night of her life and reflected on that day and looked at what she'd done wrong, even if it was the tiniest thing. And like most do not, like 99.9% do not, she made changes. So every day her soul advanced tremendously because she wasn't afraid of self-reflection, which is the thing that we avoid like the plague. And unless as we get older and we deepen or we go through some sort of intense suffering that hits us up beside our head, then we go into that self-reflection. But with some people, they take the bull by the horns and they have the courage to look at themselves and to say, why did I get into these tremendous messes in my life? Like, I can't blame my parents, because esoteric astrology shows us why, and we'll get into this down the road, why we chose the parents we chose. So they're not our, we're not victims to the situation of our parents, just as our children aren't. They chose that dynamic so that they would, and we chose that dynamic so that we would have wounds triggered, which would be the past life frailties of the South Node. And so by having those frailties triggered, instead of going, oh, well, I was sexually abused, or I was abandoned by my mother, or my father died when I was 4, or whatever, ad infinitum, we look at it and we say, there was something deeper, something more profound to this whole expression of suffering that I chose to enter into so that I could move from being a victim to that impression and heal that wound and then go on and help others. But I can only heal that wound by reaching for my North Node, because my North Node holds the key to my liberation. So what a wonderful thing to study the North and South Nodes